Opposed? So carries. Public comment. Rick, are they stacked up like cordwood out there?
They are. They're big goose egg, so we don't have anybody for the public in attendance at this point in time.
Okay, so being none, we will move on to commission members' reports. Kieran?
Nothing to report.
Daphne?
Nothing to report.
Ryan? Oh, no. Mark?
No report.
Alan, this is where you would report if you had something to say about attending something or learning something out in the public or whatever.
Okay.
Sometimes like you might go to a Lacey Council meeting and you heard them talking about something that might be of interest. So.
Okay.
All right, Gail?
Well, nothing to report.
No report.
And now I'm going to just take a quick minute to go around the room and introduce ourselves to Alan, starting with Kieran.
Hi, Alan. My name is Kieran McMichael, and I'm a school teacher. I live here in Lacey, and I own my home right by Lacey Midtown. So welcome.
Thank you.
Daphne.
Hi, Alan. Welcome. I've been on the Planning Commission just over 3 years. I'm in the urban growth area, so I don't actually live in the city out in McAllister Park. So welcome. It's a great group and glad to have you.
Thank you.
Mark.
Welcome, Alan. It's good to have you on board. I've been with I'm Mark Meininger. I've been with the Lacey Planning Commission for a little over 3 years as well. I also live in the urban growth area. I'm on the north end of Pattison Lake. But anyway, it's good to have another member of the team. Thanks.
Nice to meet you.
Gail.
Hi, Alan. I'm Gail Madden. I'm 2 years into this stint on the Planning Commission, and I live in Panorama.
And she's vice chair.
Right.
Don't forget that important part.
That's right. That's right.
And Alan, I'm Dave Wasson. I live in Jubilee, Northeast Lacey. Been on the commission I'm in my 4th year, I think. And I am the chair. And in my work life, I am the president of Batdorf and Bronson Coffee, also known as Dancing Goats. So.
Oh, cool.
And then, Rick, do you want to introduce your team to Alan before Alan introduces himself?
When I got the pleasure to also meet Alan again yesterday afternoon, so we got a chance to chat a little bit about the Planning Commission orientation. So good to see you, Alan. Rick Walk, Director of Community Economic Development. And then Grant, would you like to introduce yourself? And then Ryan, and then Leah.
Hi, Grant Beck. I'm the Planning and Development Services Manager. Been with Lacey for about 5 months. I was worked with the Community Development Director in the City of Yelm for the 19 years previous to that. So grew up in the area and finally came home. I interned with Lacey in 1985. So
cool.
Yes, it's my turn now. So hi, Alan. I'm Ryan Andrews, Long Range Planning Manager. Been with the city going on 17 years now. And started actually as an intern with the department back in the late 90s. So staff to the Planning Commission as well. And trying to get Hans logged in. It doesn't look like Hans is here, but Hans will be giving a presentation tonight. We have Hans Shepard with us as well. Hans is a senior planner in our department.
Okay.
Does Leah want to?
Leah, are you there? You point out the shadows?
Yep.
There she is.
She's on mute.
Or her audio's not working.
Nope.
So Leah is with us pretty much every meeting. She's provides tremendous support to the Planning Commission and staff and scheduling and coordinating the meetings and getting packets out and setting up and managing the Zoom webinar. So she's with the city of Lacey, gosh, I want to say it was at least 20 years. And like I said, our primary support for all the Planning Commission activities.
And now it's your turn, Alan. You can introduce yourself to the group.
Well, hi everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Alan. I've been a resident of Lacey for the last, it was 1 year last week. I live in the Hicks Lake area. Moved here from Spokane, and my day job is a scope writer for a construction company for catastrophe events like fires and floods and that sort of thing.
Well, welcome, Alan. Okay, let us move on. Rick.
So the only thing I really want to touch base upon tonight on the director's report is, as everybody I think is aware, the COVID restrictions, the statewide COVID restrictions relating to masking and social distancing has been rescinded as of last Saturday. And so, of course, going forward, everything's more on a voluntary basis. As such, we are going to start looking at transitioning our meetings for the council, as well as all the boards and commissions and committees, into a hybrid format. The City Council is going to have their first hybrid formatted meeting next Thursday, the 24th. It's a work session. And then next week's council committees will also be in that hybrid format as well. Actually tonight, concurrently with the Planning Commission meeting, the Equity Commission is holding a joint meeting with the Youth Council, and that is going to be hybrid tonight. So we're going to have a couple of meetings occur that's going to work out some of the kinks of hybrid, and we're looking to transition the Planning Commission into a hybrid meeting format, the second meeting in April. So that'd be April 19th. And if that's agreeable, that gives us time as staff to kind of watch and observe some of these other meetings and how they're formatted and how they're set up. Also, John Koch of our Public Affairs Office is going to be meeting with us and other departmental staff in other departments to talk about some of the setup and arrangements and how to function with the hybrid format as well. So that will happen on the 30th. So that'll give us some time before that first meeting where we go live in the hybrid format. So any questions from the Planning Commission on that at this point? Yes, Mark.
Yeah, so the meeting on the 5th will be at 5 o'clock, just the way we're doing it in Zoom.
Right.
Then the one on the 19th will also be at 5 o'clock.
Well, that's the other piece of this is if we go to a hybrid format, because we moved to a 5 o'clock start with the Planning Commission because we're going into the virtual world and being an easier transition from people that were either working at home or having a transition from work to the virtual meeting. If we go to a hybrid format, we may need to allow a little bit of a time for people to be able to attend in person. So I will suggest that the Planning Commission consider moving our meeting time when we go to the hybrid format on the 19th to 6 o'clock. That's consistent with the council meetings. Council has moved their meeting time to 6 o'clock, anticipating the hybrid format. And so we'll have consistent start times. And then that also gives that hour of transition for people to be able to, if they want to attend in person, to be able to go from wherever they are and come to City Hall. And if the Planning Commission is agreeable to that, we will need to amend the Planning Commission bylaws to reestablish that start time, and we would bring that back to the Planning Commission at your next meeting.
Thank you.
How are people feeling about the 6 o'clock hybrid? Is that workable for everybody?
Yeah, works for me.
Yep. Sure.
Great. And then
works for Peggy too. I talked to her.
Yep.
And the other part of it too is I just want to get a sense from the Planning Commissioners of in a hybrid format, how many of you would expect to attend in person, and how many of you would want to continue on in virtual, so we kind of have a sense as we start planning the room and set up.
In person, raise your hand.
I plan to be here, be in person, but I am going to be taking a trip, and I'll take the iPad along with me and then join hybridly when maybe in early May.
So you just pointed out one of the silver linings of the past 2+ years of having to go through this is now we're going to have if somebody's needs to leave, they still have the option to attend or pay attention on their travels too. So that is the flexibility that this provides.
Yeah.
Rick, does the state of Washington have to pass something to make this all kosher and all okay?
Oh, in terms of like public meetings acts or
yeah, exactly.
No, there's already guidance in place to talk about hybrid meetings and what you need to do in terms of setup and access. You're always going to need to have a phone access as well. And so that's the part of the arrangements that we'll be working out with public affairs and make sure we hit all those protocols and we're setting up the meeting. Another nice thing too is there always will be at least one person physically in the meeting space, but whoever's managing the virtual piece, they don't actually have to be in the meeting. So it provides that flexibility too in providing that support for the platform.
Okay. Anything else, Rick?
That's all I have. Unless there's any questions from the Planning Commission on anything that they've seen in the community.
Nope. Okay, so what, Ryan, are you going to talk about the energy efficient program now?
That'll be Hans. Hans is having some technical difficulties. Hans, are you here?
Is he the city of Lacey?
Can't hear him at all.
No, you can't hear
me.
There he is.
Oh,
yeah, there you go.
Oh, okay. Well, at least we have sound. Sorry about that. You guys might be stuck looking at a City of Lacey logo this evening. Still trying to figure that one out. I'm not sure that that's the worst case scenario, but we'll see if we can address that later. I think I can at least share my screen, so we might just jump right into it. If that works with everybody. I'm just going to get my different windows sorted here. And I was actually going to start with the accessory dwelling units. I was going to talk to you guys about two different programs tonight. So let me see if I can share my screen here. All right. Hopefully everyone can see a window that says accessory dwelling units on it.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Yeah. All right. So as I guess quick background about me, I actually started at the City of Lacey in January. But before that, I was working as a project manager at a local planning and engineering group in town for about 6 years. And then before that, I was at City of Olympia. So I think I've crossed paths with most of you in at least one of those various different roles, or more recently at my time here. So as far as today, what I wanted to talk to you about, we have two different programs. This is the ADU program. And there's a bit of backstory on that. Many of you might be at least peripherally aware of this. This actually, we tried to initially kick this off in around 2019, but that actually cleanly aligned with the COVID-19 stay home, stay healthy order, which kind of put a damper in our community outreach element of this engagement. So we've been trying to reinitiate this a little bit and get it back out in the front of folks. So with that, I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory and then talk about some of the tasks that we've identified that we're hoping to do this year as far as carrying that program forward and getting that back out in front of folks. So this right here is a quick graphic to kind of show what an ADU is. It's intended to be smaller in size to a primary residential structure. It's supposed to be independent from the main residence, so fully autonomous with its own bathroom, bedrooms, kitchen, private access, that kind of thing. And then it also has to contain your day-to-day kind of basic living amenities. As far as ADUs, this one pictured here is actually what's called a detached ADU, which is the most common type of ADU that we're going to be talking about today. Jumping back one slide here, you can kind of see this little graphic along the bottom. There's actually 6 different types of accessory dwelling units, if you will. One is actually over here, just moving left to right. connected to the primary residence, but still separate as far as uses and amenities. One is some kind of either basement or attic conversion. Again, fully separate living spaces and units. And then there's two more that have to do with garage conversions, either just a regular garage conversion here, or sometimes an additional living space that's added to the top of a garage. And then the primary one is this detached form here, which is like an entirely separate unit, also known as sometimes like a granny flat or an extra, yeah, there's a range of different names for it, I should say. But that's kind of a background of what an ADU is. And then really kind of what got this program going with the city of Lacey, or I should say what kind of reignited this was the affordable housing strategy. It was specifically actually called out as a fantastic program that really actually meets a lot of the identified needs within the community as far as density, additional housing for the middle class, potential form of passive income, and then also flexible family living options. So it really kind of hits a lot of those marks in a lot of different ways. With that in mind, in 2019, we kind of took a deeper dive and started looking at design guidelines for ADUs and how can we really kind of streamline this process and make it more accessible and more attainable for everyday residents. So we looked at affordability as far as the design and build of it. We looked at accessibility options. So how easy it is to get to and from these structures, flexibility in design so they can remain consistent with existing housing stock in the neighborhood. And then how can they remain consistent with city design guidelines? So setbacks, privacy, sewer connections, lot development, stormwater management, parking, and egress and pedestrian pathways and that kind of thing. So with that, we actually partnered with a local architecture firm in town to develop 4 different units that actually really meet all of those standards and expectations, are really consistent with City of Lacey design standards. We actually got these pre-approved. So you can actually come to the counter now and actually kind of start talking with us about your interest in potentially developing an ADU. And we actually have these ready-made plans ready to go that actually run through a lot of the initial hurdles that you might encounter if you were trying to do this from scratch. So the pre-approved designs, which are intended to save money and time in the kind of design phases. We've also partnered with a range of local lenders and builders to figure out what kind of lending strategies and programs are out there and who's familiar with actually building these things to really kind of identify some of those early on barriers and break them down to make it easier to actually get one of these going in your backyard. So with that, we have the 4 different designs. The smallest is actually comes in around 480 square feet. This is called the studio, and it's more of kind of a flex space. And you can see the layout here in the rendering. And then moving up into the 1 bedroom, you see kind of a little bit more of a defined spaces, a formalized dining room, kitchen, and a separate bedroom. And then bumping up into the 2 bedroom, this one is an expansion of what the 1 bedroom was to add that additional bedroom onto the end here. And a little bit more space, a little bit more room. This one actually gets up into that 800 square feet. And then there's actually also a 2-story option with the kitchen down below and then the living spaces up above. Each of these really fits within all of the City of Lacey design guidelines and matches the standards that we're looking for as far as privacy and access and ease of development. And then the great thing about each one of these is that while the plans themselves are ready and available, each one is adaptable. So you can really swap in and out different exterior treatments to really kind of right size it and match with the surrounding area and make it consistent with the existing house that's already in place. So whether that's your roof style or your exterior walls, there's a lot of flexibility in that. You can see the studios here on the left, the 1 bedrooms here, 2 bedrooms, and then the 2-story 2 bedrooms, just a few of the renderings, but there's a lot of opportunities out there. And really these are in place to get people thinking about these things and start envisioning what could fit in their yard. As far as next steps within the program, there's a couple that we've identified. One is expanding our list of pre-approved units. So the Washington State Department of Labor and Industries actually already certifies a few additional units. Those units are ones that we're going to be taking a look at to see if they fit within our design standards. These are actually prefabricated factory assembled ones. So it actually reduces the cost range and helps improve the predictability of these things from start to finish when people are looking at potentially getting one of these for their backyard. And there's actually a showroom in Seattle that actually has these fully built, so you can actually go and look at them, and kind of helps with that visioning process. We're also going to be developing a design guide. While this is in the municipal code, we've found that a lot of other communities are really actually trying to take that and creating a full-blown design guide as far as standards and renderings. So we're going to take that and make it a little bit more accessible and turn that into a booklet, if you will, that folks can actually work through as they're thinking about doing these, developing one of these. And then we're also looking at a site suitability map, which is going to be a GIS-enabled kind of interactive inventory of available residential parcels. And it's going to break down information like zoning, lot coverage, accessibility, things like that, that actually will help you answer some of those early on questions about the feasibility of constructing an ADU on your lot. And then once all of those are in place, we're going to reignite kind of our outreach efforts that stalled right around the early or late 2019 with direct mailers, utility inserts, social media blasts, that kind of thing, community events, to really kind of get this information back out there, reintroduce the public to this program, and make sure that these resources are in front of folks. And I'm getting a message here. And then, yeah, that's a great point. So we're going to have a range of different formats of engagement, including online ones and in person. So really kind of trying to remain as adaptable as possible to folks' schedules to really kind of get this out in front of them and give as many people an opportunity to experience and learn about these things as possible. So with that, that's kind of our ADU program in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions that folks might have. So yeah, we'll just jump right into it.
So Hans, I was here when the initial ADUs were done, and they had to be such a size lot that an ADU was able to be placed on. And for some reason, I'm not sure why, I always thought ADUs were separate units, like you showed the examples that we have, you know. But I am intrigued by this basement being ADU, or a garage being ADU, or an add-on to the building being ADU. Or an attic, or not that necessarily an attic, but some kind of open upper area being that. So is that still under the same rules by square foot on a lot?
Yeah, so sounds like there are two different questions there, and I can answer them both. The first one, so when we initially rolled out this program, we were kind of targeting lots that were 10,000 square feet or above. More recently, we've been looking at that number and finding that it's still feasible to construct one of these units on smaller lots than that. So we're actually running back through all of our housing parcels and housing stock and looking at what number really does make sense for that. And I think the GIS enabled feasibility map that we're working on creating is going to help to answer a lot of those questions, because we don't really want to be pushing out a hard 10,000 square foot number when in fact there's a lot more flexibility in there depending on the site layout that we can really work with. So,
and you said a JAS?
Sorry, GIS.
GIS, okay. Which stands for?
Geographic Information Systems.
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm
sorry.
throwing
That's all
acronyms at
right.
you here. So it's an online tool that will be basically a map that folks can zoom into their property and click on it and learn about site coverage requirements and impervious surfaces and any kind of environmental restrictions that might exist to get some of those early questions as far as the feasibility of actually placing one of these units on their lot.
So are we looking at, I mean, have you have an estimate, like, let's just say we had, 3,000 lots that were 10,000 square feet or more. Do we have an estimate of how many more additional lots that would be available for these type of ADUs?
So we did conduct an initial inventory of it with the 10,000 square marker as a target. And at that time, there are around 2,300 residential lots that would be compatible with that. That said, I think that we can actually expand that number and look at lots that are still near that mark, but a little bit more flexibility as far as the amount of square footage. So that's, yeah, so I think in 2019 is when we initially did that query, and there were about 2,000 lots that fell into that category. But I think that there are quite a few more that are near that would still actually be a great fit for an accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, let's let Mark ask his question next.
Yeah.
Hold on, Ryan.
Hans, this is Mark Meininger. Good presentation. A couple of questions for you. The first is, does this apply strictly to homes that are within the city limits, or does it include the UGA as well?
So for our program, this is going to be specifically within the city limits. That said, the city of Olympia and the city of Tumwater and Thurston County are all actually working on parallel tracks. The 4 different units that we discussed in this presentation have actually also been approved in the city of Olympia and Tumwater. And Thurston County is also working on approving some of these lots or these units as well. So while our program is specific to the city of Lacey, it's definitely also something that's a broader effort that's taking place in neighboring jurisdictions as well.
Yeah, that's great. I really like the additional designs that you showed tonight. There were a few originally, but like somebody's been working on these. There's some really nice, they look nice from the outside and nice layout on the inside. Now, I like the idea of this being promoted heavily once it's up and running. Has there been any thought to the idea of maybe even constructing one and having an open house?
So that, I don't know how far that thought process has been carried forward. I think it would take the willingness of a potential property owner to open up their property for that kind of thing. There definitely are a number of ADUs in Lacey, but then also Thurston County as a whole. So and then there's also the showroom that in Seattle that does actually offer some modular examples of what that can look like that folks can walk around in. But that would actually be a great idea of something that we could include as far as potential next steps to look at.
What I was thinking of is maybe even building one that could potentially be moved later and maybe erect it maybe near the depot district or something, and have a kind of an open house for the community to really look at it and sell the whole concept to the community. And then perhaps that one could be donated or given to someone in the city limits. Anyway, just a thought.
That's something it's a good thought. Of course, that'd take a budget and somatics to work out. One thing we do have though is, as part of, we received the Governor's Smart Communities Award for the ADU program. And part of that process is the Department of Commerce came out when they presented the award from Director Lisa Brown. They also had a film crew with them, and they're taking video footage. And we actually drove out to one of the completed ADUs that somebody utilized, the first one utilizing this program. And so we got video of the inside and outside and an interview with that individual. And so what we're planning on is, as they produce that video, we should get the raw footage here in the next couple of weeks. that we would be able to use that video to also promote that and have that virtual tool and example of an ADU that was built using this program. So that's another way we can do that, providing that out to the public.
Yeah, I just think if we really promote it well, and it sounds like you've got some good ideas, this is something that will really take off and make a big difference.
Okay, let's move to Gail.
Okay, my question is, I think this is a great idea, actually. I've always thought this was a great idea, and particularly for people who want to rent them out. But my question is, are we aware of homeowners associations or groups that preclude this kind of rental property on lots within their community that might stymie this a little bit?
Yes, that is one of the challenges of the ADU program, especially your newer subdivisions that have active homeowner associations and CC&Rs often prohibit accessory dwelling units. So that is something too that if an individual wants to do that, they will need to go through their HOA and either amend those CC&Rs or not. However, we do not, in our land use or permit decisions, we do not enforce private covenants. We will be able to administer that any type of inquiry based on city regulation. So it'll be up to the individual.
Right, but if they didn't go through that process, it would certainly be a problem for the homeowner. Yeah,
we would have a standard practice of making sure that people check with their HOA and CC&Rs, but we wouldn't enforce those.
Yeah. Okay.
And that is one thing too the legislature is looking on, and I think they're had some proposed legislation this past year that didn't make it through, but they're looking at that issue and moving forward. Any new CC&Rs would not be able to prohibit ADUs because that is also looked at from the state perspective as another form of housing that can be accessible and affordable.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, Alan and then Daphne.
Okay, so I got a couple of questions. I really like the presentation. I really like the concept of the ADUs. On the freestanding ADUs on the property, I'm curious, would they be permitted as a mobile home?
So mobile homes would not fall into the category of an ADU. These are stick-built structures right now that do have a foundation. So anything that would fall into that mobile home category would not be included as part of this.
Okay. And then sorry, I got a couple of questions here. How many would you say would be permitted to fit on a quarter acre for like a 10,000 lot if there was nothing else on there?
Yeah, so right now we're doing, as the code is currently written, it's 1 unit per residential property, provided there's a single family unit already on there. And then the size of the ADU is actually, there's 2 different metrics to pay attention to. One is a percentage of the primary structure. So these do need to be subordinate in nature to the primary residence. So either 50% of the primary residence square footage or 150 square feet, I think is the max. So whichever the lesser of those 2 numbers is right now how it's set up. So it's not necessarily based on the property square footage or the acreage, if you will.
Okay. So it's dependent on it already having a structure on that land.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So these are really targeting larger lots that currently have a single family residence on them.
Right. So would there be some sort of like aid or monetary incentive for people to have these built on their lots to be able to rent out, and is that something that might be in the works?
I think I caught part of that. I might have missed the beginning of what you said there, but as far as monetary kind of incentives on the front end, by creating the pre-approved lots and working through the process with the architects, it takes out a lot of the startup costs for potential builders. And then as far as an additional source of income, that opportunity is also there. There's actually, I didn't include them in the slides today, but we do have metrics on the potential payback of what a accessory dwelling unit could be as far as paying down on your mortgage or something like that, as far as the potential trade-offs of upfront costs versus long-term investment. So those are actually pretty compelling. I unfortunately don't have that graphic for you today, but I can definitely get you that. And that's another incentive that folks might want to take a look at.
Right. Okay. I was thinking more on the lines of, just to get people to think about making the investment, like, oh, they'll get a tax break or something. Like, it just seems to be like that's the kind of thing people to like to save on stuff they're already spending versus think about the upfront costs, I feel like. So,
yeah, that's definitely
Thank
something
you.
we can take a look at.
Hey, Daphne.
Yeah, Hans, I was just wondering, I know this was rolled out in 2019, I was there, and I think we all just love the idea of this and the pre-approved plans, but I'm wondering how successful the program has been over the last few years and any lessons in the rollout in 2019, other than, of course, the pandemic, which we couldn't control, but anything we might do differently as we roll out maybe the new designs and try to get interest in this again. So just kind of a little bit of historical perspective on what we might do differently and more, or something along those lines.
For sure. So the first open house that we had was actually, I think, in February of 2020. And that was unfortunately days before everything got shut down. But what I can say is that was actually a standing room only at that open house. So there definitely was a significant amount of enthusiasm around this program at that time. Since then, we have, it hasn't been the top priority as other kind of COVID related things have kind of pushed it down the line a little bit. But I think that as far as looking at other neighboring jurisdictions and what they've been rolling out, things like a more comprehensive design guide, a little bit more of a in-depth feasibility study that you can actually kind of zoom in and do some of that initial research without having to give us a call or coming in. So kind of bridging that gap between having the initial idea and having to come talk to us, just so there's a few more resources out there to help people start envisioning these what these might look like and getting ideas for them. But I think all in all, the enthusiasm is there. We just have to get the material back out in front of people and start having these conversations.
Hey, Gail.
Hold on a second. Okay. The map that was included in your presentation that was sent to us delineates, I assume, those lots that are over 10,000 square feet. Is that right? Or that are large enough to have an accessory dwelling unit.
That's correct. That was part of the initial search that we did, and that was taking a look at lots that are 10,000 square feet or greater.
So is there a plan at all to particularly target the registered owners of those lots and say, hi, did you know that you could build a blah, blah, blah on your unit and make X dollars? And is there any sort of targeted announcement of this promotion?
Yeah, so actually in lead up to the open house that we had in 2020, those property owners were actually contacted as part of the ramping up of this program. And we actually had a lot of, I think it went out to them specifically, and then also in other things like utility inserts and mailers and things of that nature. So that outreach did take place, and we do plan to use that again moving forward. But we do want to actually expand that property list before we do it, so we can actually cast a wider net.
Great, thank you very much.
Kirian.
Yeah, I was curious. I recall hearing about the variance or the behind the house possibly changing. I can't remember if that actually occurred. What is the spacing that you need to have, between the actual ADU and the neighboring properties to the sides or to the back? Had that increased or decreased the size of the distance that we could actually build one of these?
So I believe and Ryan, feel free to correct me here if I'm a little off base, but I believe the side yard setback is 5 feet right now, and the backyard setback is 15. assuming that there's not an alleyway or an existing structure that you're converting. So if you're looking to build a new detached accessory dwelling unit, those are the standard setbacks. But if you already have something like a garage or an alleyway that runs down the back of your property, then those setbacks are a little bit different depending on the configuration of your lot.
Yeah, the rear setback was actually modified. So we've got a side setback of 5, standard setbacks for 2-story dwelling units, but for accessory dwelling units that are 1-story, those are 5 feet in the rear as well. So you get a little additional space in the backyard if you have a single story. And the idea there is that privacy issues, you know, you get 2-story units, you have 2nd-story windows looking into other people's backyards. You need to have that additional space to accommodate that versus a single story, which that privacy, we still have privacy standards. You have to provide, you know, a fence and landscaping in that 5-foot area, but it's not quite as, you know, pronounced if you have a 2-story unit. The good thing about the pre-approved plans is that they are basically very adaptable to individual lots. There are no windows actually on 2 sides of those single-story units. So you could actually, you know, using those 5-foot setbacks, put it in the corner of the yard, and you're not going to have windows on any of the neighbor-facing setback areas. So on the back and on the sides that are 5 feet, you wouldn't have any windows anyways. So that's one of the advantages of these pre-approved units, is that we've already kind of thought about some of those things like privacy and setbacks. I'll also mention, so I don't see any more questions, that just to clarify some of the financial things, and then as well the reason we're kind of looking at some additional lots. First of all, the financial considerations. You know, we've obviously done a lot of background work with our lending institutions, and you know, we've got the local lenders that are familiar with this pre-approved program that are very excited about this. But really, when it comes down to a financial feasibility, the main advantage, as far as I can tell, is, you know, not only are we front loading the design on these pre-approved plans, but you know, you don't have to pay, or you don't pay connection fees, nor do you pay for utilities, nor do you pay for things like school mitigation fees and those kinds of things. And that can run you upwards of $30,000+ for a brand new house right now. So you're able just to connect right into that existing sewer system, existing water system that's there for the house. And, you know, that's a pretty big benefit, especially, you know, in a time where we have extremely high building costs. And from what I understand right now, just to build one of these right now is about $100,000 for the smallest 480 square foot ADU. So extremely high building costs. So we want to see if we can do anything we can to bring those costs down. The other reason we're looking at reducing the lots, the 10,000 square foot, you know, guide was really for those detached accessory dwelling units, because you needed the space on the lot that really would accommodate a 480+ square foot structure. But, you know, in looking at this, we want to broaden the scope to promote all ADUs. Obviously, promote our own pre-approved program, but promote all ADUs, including attached accessory dwelling units that people might want to. And those are things that we can't really pre-design. Those are really specific to individual houses, whether that's a garage conversion or an addition or whatever. You're going to have to see a designer to be able to do that. But there are houses on, 7,500 square foot lots. I've seen accessory dwelling units on lots that are 5,000 square feet. So, that's part of this too, is broadening our scope when it comes to those lot sizes to make sure that we have, everything covered. And that will be part of that mapping program that Hans will be developing. So people that are kind of in this pre-feasibility thing, hey, would this, asking themselves a question, hey, would this work for me? They can actually go in and see, okay, and we'll have some work done for them that would give them kind of a, yeah, this might work, or no, you might want to talk to us kind of, feasibility test that will help inform them and take them and push them towards the next step in the right direction. So hopefully that helps clarify some of those things.
I'm really surprised overall that somebody hasn't said, gosh, I have this vacant land somewhere and I could take these plans and build cluster housing, low cost housing, residential communities for people who don't have homes, who could pay rent on something small like this. I mean, this is really a revolutionary sort of approach to housing lots and lots of people. That would be, I would think, a viable plan to start some small housing communities.
Yeah. And those type of cottage type design, we have ordinances in place that allow that type of development to occur. And one example of that too is a little bit of the Habitat for Humanity project that Ryan worked on off of 37th, where they did more of a cottage style and clustering of smaller houses. But that is something that could happen on individual lots. But in terms of accessory dwellings, that's where, as both Hans and Ryan have said, you got to have the primary residence in order to have the accessory dwelling unit in the on the yard or attached or detached.
Right, as far as an ADU goes, but as far as a set of plans for a primary residence, they're right out there.
Yep.
And we have had one person in Lacey take advantage of these plans to build a single family house, a small house on an existing lot. So there's no requirement that these plans have to be used as an ADU. They're able to be used for any function. In Lacey, we just kind of, when it came down to the design and those kinds of things, we were just thinking primarily accessory dwelling units, but we actually have had one person take advantage of the, using this for a house plan.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we see people inquire about, doing this, and they're trying to figure out how to have a family member that needs a place, whether it's an aging parent or a child or a sibling, and that options are available to them. But also too, as a potential investment income for their retirement years, and downsizing, that they could even move into the accessory dwelling unit and rent out the
house.
And that creates a little bit of movement in that housing stock that we've been talking about that is needed for quite some time.
Right.
One other thing I just want to make sure the Planning Commission is just aware of is it's not something that's happening this year, but this ADU programs is something taken up at the state legislature as another way of getting more diversity or affordable housing out on the street, on the ground. And so they really looked at this in promoting ADUs. And one of there was a bill proposed this year that almost made it through the legislature that would have required all jurisdictions in the state that would allow on lots greater than 4,500 square feet, 2 ADUs, one being detached and one attached, allow that possibility. Of course, you still have to meet the local site design standards, like your setbacks and design and those type of things, but that just on its own, you couldn't prohibit somebody from doing 2 ADUs. And so that's another thing that may be coming down next year, because as it went through the legislature, that bill lasted up until the final weeks before it got didn't make it out of committee. So we'll expect that same conversation to continue next year's legislative session, which is a longer session as well. And if that does come through fruition, we'll be back in front of the Planning Commission to look at our local regulations to see how we move forward to be consistent with whatever state law that's enacted in the future.
Okay. On to energy efficiency program.
Absolutely. So let's pivot really quickly here. I will start sharing my screen again. All right. So a little bit about this program. This program is focusing on the ways to improve energy efficiency for existing housing stock within the city. As a bit of background, the city converted all of its municipal buildings to renewable energy back in 2007. And since then, there's been a growing emphasis on taking different renewable acts to really kind of improve the overall energy efficiency of the city as a whole. In 2016, the city was one of the primary champions of the Buy Direct program through PSC, which actually helped fund the Skookumchuck wind facility, which is now actually operational. So that's an exciting development. More recently, the city has been a pretty active participant in the Thurston climate mitigation plan. And one of the significant kind of large findings of that was that residential energy use is currently the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions within our region. taken a step further, more than 2/3 of the housing units that are currently in existence today will be in existence and sorry, I messed that code up, but they'll be around in 2050 as well. So retrofitting is going to be a significant part of really bringing our current housing stock in line with some of our energy efficiency and climate mitigation goals that are already out there in place today. Within the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan, they actually highlighted 6 different actions that really would take steps towards reducing that production of greenhouse gases. These actions included residential energy performance ratings, so actually reporting on the energy consumption of different units, both when renting, but then also when you're selling your home. Residential energy audits, which is one of the things that we're going to be focusing on as part of this program. Rental housing energy efficiency incentives, so ways to actually incentivize retrofits for renters. So a lot of times it's hard to reach those folks that are maybe only in a home temporarily as they're renting and don't see a lot of long-term personal investment in that home. So finding ways to really kind of incentivize that on the shorter term and making that more of an appealing program for renters as well as homeowners. So really making sure that we reach out to both of those groups. Property tax incentives, and then rental housing energy efficiency goals and standards throughout the community. So those were all things that were identified as part of the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. Within both the affordable housing strategy for the city of Lacey and the comprehensive plan in general, there's a pretty significant emphasis on maximizing energy efficiency and conserving heating, cooling, and lighting in building and services. So that's really kind of echoed throughout a lot of the different plans that are in place today. So this program is, we're going to be kicking that off to really kind of address and trying to take some of those goals and turn them into actions and taking that a step forward. So as far as next steps, we are still in the early phases of this program, but some initial research has really actually identified a lot of public, private, and nonprofit programs that are already actually out there and in place today, all the way from the federal level all the way down to the local level. So one of the initial steps that we really want to do is essentially a program gap analysis to figure out what programs are really in place, who those are set up for, and figure out some of the areas of gaps where those programs might not necessarily be reaching certain demographics or housing groups, areas of overlap, so areas where we don't need to duplicate because they really are covered, and then some of those other potential barriers to residents and homeowners. Within that, we're also going to be reaching out and actually conducting interviews with a lot of those different agencies, but also a lot of the local stakeholders and regional partners, as well as actually folks that just own homes or housing agencies within the community. So we're looking at landlord management agencies, we're looking at tenant and renter groups, and then also finding ways to really reach out and include the aging housing stock, which is going to be that big emphasis of where they were really kind of potentially developed under a previous kind of standard of energy efficiency, and trying to find ways to really bring those up to current standards, because a lot of those housing, that housing stock is going to be, as we saw, around for a long time. So it's going to be important to not only promote that for currently developed homes, but the older housing stock that's really kind of lagging behind. Within that, we've also already identified 2 primary partners that we're looking at. PSE is a great one. They actually on their website have a whole host of different resources that are out there. But I think what we're finding is that a lot of these resources, while they do exist, there's a disconnect between them and actually folks using them or looking at them or finding out about them. But PSE actually offers a lot of things like energy breakdown. So it compares your consumption to your neighbors or comparable houses. So it's kind of a little bit of a competition comparison to see how, kind of benchmark to see how you're doing. They offer breakdowns on where your energy consumption is going. And they also offer a whole host of different recommendations and resources on how to really kind of zero in on those areas that might be consuming larger portions of your energy and addressing them to really kind of lower those overall consumption draws, if you will. And then the other one that we're looking at was a partnership with Timberland Regional Library and setting up some kind of home energy assessment program where you actually might have be able to go into your house and use things like appliance meters, or maybe even something like a thermal camera to actually identify within your home where those energy sucks or that loss is happening. So then you can actually start thinking about weather stripping or Energy Star, LED options, something like that, to really actually go through your house and make changes. There were a few programs that were out there previously, but they've all been shut down kind of running through COVID. So whether or not those start back up, or some kind of rental program or partnership that really kind of gets that going again. And then once we've completed those interviews and really figured out where the gaps are within those programs, our goal is to really fit ourselves amongst them all and really kind of connect people with the resources to really kind of bridge that gap. Because while there is a lot of helpful information out there, I think that it's not getting to the actual homeowners or the renters, or the people that we want to actually be making these changes. So just really kind of facilitating that connection is going to be a huge part of this. So that community outreach element. So once we learn a little bit more, is really kind of reaching out to the community to help them make those connections, and whether or not it's doing an energy audit or finding a rebate program or getting connected with the right organization to make some of those retrofits. So that's going to be the follow-up once we kind of learn more about where these missing gaps are. And I think that one's, so that one's a little bit of a shorter presentation, still kind of in our learning and data collection phase right now, but more to come on this one. You have any questions?
Hey, Hans, I don't, maybe somebody else can speak to this, but a number of years ago, Lacey did a program to make Lacey the greenest city kind of thing. Is it time to redo that again with increased population and, get more people buying green power?
That could be, that was an effort we pushed several years ago about the Green Power Program, and getting Lacey residents or households to sign up for that program. And if I remember correctly, we had kind of the highest participation rate of Lacey households, one of the higher participation rates in the state. And I think, Chair Watson, that might be a good suggestion as we do all these different things, how do we push that out again to try to get people to sign up for green power? And also, aware of some of the activities that PSE is doing, because when that initial push for green power was going on, that was really to offset the purchase of it. But now PSE is doing that South County Green Power Project. And so now there's more of a direct benefit of what you're purchasing for green power may be also green sourced. So I think it's something good that we can put into the mix of, further promotion through our public affairs office, as well as our efforts with this project.
Okay, Daphne?
I know we're just kind of introducing this, Hans, but I was kind of wondering, what do we see as the main difference between the 1980s or pre-80s homes versus now? Is it, is it windows? Is it, just wear and tear on like seals and such? I just was curious where we think the biggest gain might be. And then I also wondered, I have to admit, that competitive thing on the Puget Sound Energy, when I was a household of 5, I took great offense to that. It's like, I got a lot of people taking showers in here. And then now that I'm a household of 2, I'm like, oh, look at me winning the day. And so I don't know, I worry maybe a little more communication might, but that's Puget Sound Energy. But interested on the differences between the pre-80s homes and now, what we might think the big gain might be.
For sure. So yeah, for your first question, older homes were, depending on when they were built in 1980s, there's just kind of a general line of before and after, but it's kind of a gray area, if you will. But definitely older homes were built under different energy efficiency standards. So whether or not that's the type of insulation that was used, the windows, any kind of passageways, things like that, really did dictate how energy efficient the house was. So older, just generally speaking, older homes are not as good at energy efficiency or kind of holding and maintaining heat as newer homes and newer designs. So that's why that focus is there, because that's actually where some of our larger gains can take place. That's not to say that we don't also want to provide these services for newer homes, but the gains will not necessarily be as substantial in a more modern home that was already developed with some of those things like double pane windows or any other number of design standards that really have kind of already taken steps to improve those energy efficiencies. So that's kind of why that emphasis was there. And then on the competition one, for sure, yeah, there's not a clean comparison from one house to another. So yeah, for different folks, different approaches are going to be more or less compelling or frustrating. So that's not to say that any one approach is going to be the best fit for everybody, but there's more so just to identify that there's a lot of different great resources out there that we can kind of pull from to utilize within this program moving forward.
Okay, Kirian.
I know my neighborhood and a lot of the homes around here were built in the 50s, so there's heating oil and other things like that. I was wondering, are there, how much of an impact converting homes off of heating oil, or if you even know the number or the amount of homes that are using gas to heat their homes, like diesel oil, there are within the city, and how much that contributes to the actual global warming, or this climate mitigation rather?
So I don't have numbers on that at this time, but that is definitely something that we will want to take a look at as part of this project to get some understanding of kind of baseline conditions and where they are today, so that as we advance forward, that we can kind of have metrics from which we can kind of compare the success of the program overall and see kind of where those changes are taking place. So I don't have a hard number for you right now, but that is something that we can definitely do a little bit more research on.
Okay. Any other questions? I just put solar on my house.
There you go. Yeah, no,
so,
I'm definitely one of the gas heating houses right now. So I fall into that category. So there's definitely opportunities all around.
Yep. All righty. So thank you, Hans, for both of your presentations. And we'll move on to Rick's presentation on community work group on homelessness. Just to let you know, I've asked him to focus on less process and more outcome. And the only reason I asked him to do that was of time. You should have all received an email from him on his presentation, and you'll have an opportunity to look at that at your leisure.
And Dave also asked that I do not go past 6, and since it's after 6, I think I am done with my presentation now. So thank you, and really the purpose of this is just kind of give a primer to the Planning Commission on the results of the homeless work group and their recommendations. And we did do a full presentation with the City Council a couple of about a month ago, and I provided that presentation, as Dave said, to all the Planning Commission members in a email. So you can go through that presentation in detail. So as he said, we won't focus on process, so we can go ahead and skip through this slide talking about the 15 minutes. This slide that highlights our virtual webinar series, and then the virtual open house results. really get to the gist of the recommendations. And I do have to do a little bit of process to set this up, in that there are basically 3 stages of kind of decisions or points where we need the work group to get some decision or consensus around. And it was really difficult with the get consensus on this type of topic, because it was, you know, as we all know, very complex, very emotional, and there's a lot of different perspectives and emotions on that. So, and we're also meeting in the virtual world for the past year and a half. But the first step was to really establish kind of a general framework of principles that the committee would then judge or guide their recommendations that they are developing against. And so this is a set of principles that they developed that include that any actions or recommendations they create will not perpetuate or cause additional physical, psychological, or undue economic harm to any member of the Lacey or larger community. We'll consider short and long-term effects, as well as plan for possible negative unintended consequences. Will be based on meaningful collaborations among affected individuals, entities, and organizations. Will be tailored to the unhoused individual from the Lacey community, and will be based on the best available information, and progress will be measured and regulated for the community. So as you can see, these are very broad statements, and they're not intended to say, yes, this, if you have to meet all these for a decision to go forward. It just, because as you can read that, you can probably argue any type of action is going to either fit or not fit within one of those statements. And you can have still different perspectives. But it was just having that thought process, think about these things as some of these recommendations and strategies were weighed. So the next step was establish goals. And these goals are really the categories that the recommended strategies will be put under as they formulate the plan, and as I will carry that plan forward to a final document with the council. So the goal categories they came up with 6 of them. One is being safe and affordable shelter options are available to anyone that is unsheltered. Safe and affordable housing solutions are available to all. So that goal is really going to be where your strategies for, you know, things like tiny villages or affordable housing strategies, those types of things would fit under. Number 2 would be services and resources are seamless, streamlined, easy to, it should be easy, not easy to access, trauma-informed, and tailored to the individual person experiencing homelessness. And then of course, goal number 3, robust prevention and early intervention strategies complement other strategies to reduce longer-term and chronic homelessness. All services offered in Lacey are highly collaborative and connected, making the most efficient and effective use of available resources toward achieving all other local goals in homelessness. Goal 5, the community is educated about homelessness and causes, how to make meaningful differences, and how the city of Lacey and other partners are responding. And then goal 6, ensuring the community is safe and clean and inviting environment for all who live, work, and play here. And so those are the goal frameworks. And through the whole conversation, this is kind of the outcome of one pager of some of those results. And so if you look at this graphic, you'll see at the top where it says first order principles. Those are basically the summary of the principles. Then you have the next row, the goals listed. And the strategy design is just general features that they're not really, they're just more guidance again for how these strategies should be implemented. And again, as they went through the goals and principles, they were really focused on not just meeting the homeless needs, but also meeting the broader community needs. And so it was really looking at, when you look at Lacey communities, both housed and unhoused is the approach. You should keep both in mind. And anything that is done should be fiscally responsible. And there should be an accountability portion along with all the strategies. So again, when you do things, there needs to be, the community kind of coalesce around, there needs to be some level of accountability, both for the city and the actions the city takes, also the homeless individual accessing services and being out in the streets as well. So there's kind of looking at both flavors.
Hey, Rick, so sorry to interrupt you. It's really hard to see your slide.
Oh.
Could you go up to the view up in the upper left? Oh, yeah, that's fine too. Sorry. Perfect. I don't know if anybody else was having problems.
And then again, this is a really busy slide. And again, I have it in that email, the presentation I emailed to you, so you can take a little closer look. And then down along the bottom side is the various goal categories, and listed in there are the strategies that fit under those goals. And I won't go through each one of those here because I will go in the later slides, some of those strategies. But then also this will tackle what the problems that those strategies will eventually address. So I just want to kind of give a brief overview. I went really fast through this slide because on the next slides, we'll go through each goal and some of the strategies that rose to the top. And again, we didn't have really any consensus out of the work group on any one of these strategies. And as they worked through the various goal categories, they spent the most time on this goal 1 because that's really where you get the shelter options discussion. And under each strategy item, you'll see in parentheses after the end of it, like 3 support, 5 can live with, 1 opposed. That was the final polling results of the final meeting of the work group. And as you can see, again, various ones, these are the ones that rose to the top of the ones that were considered. And even then, there was not a unanimous or I would say overwhelming consensus on approach. So again, on this handoff to council, it's like these are the ones that we can basically start with, and the council is going to need to go through probably a several step process to hone in on what strategies the city will do and finish out the plan. So again, under the goal 1, the strategies that came to the top was establish a managed safe parking program away from residential and heavy traffic areas with good neighbor agreements that provide safety and cleanliness. Basically, the work group was looking at, you've got to provide some level of parking. They're kind of modeling after the permit program we had created in the City Hall parking lot. But in any event, it has to have some structure to it, some management and oversight, and accountability to make sure rules are followed, and that there's outreach efforts to the neighboring property owners so they're informed of what's happening, what's being planned, and then also too, as something's set up and operated, if there are problems, a good communication port that those problems can be addressed quickly to eliminate or reduce those impacts. Strategy number 1.2 is establish a managed micro home village, again, away from residential areas, accessible to people who agree to a code of conduct. Modeling something after what's similar to the Plum Street Village that is actually managed by Lehigh on behalf of the city of Olympia is one example of that. So again, they were looking at more of your more established shelter options, more protective shelter options versus something that would be over time having to replace, like say tents. They can deteriorate over time. You're constantly battling that deterioration process, and it's not a very safe structure for somebody to be living in. Strategy 1.3, proactively work to develop support partnerships and facilitate increase in available sober homes in Lacey. That's really looking at kind of those living sober type models out there that's in the community. There's several types. One of the most known is the Oxford House. And how can the city really promote expansion of those type of housing for clean and sober living was a strategy that the group brought forward. And then identify and donate surplus properties to convert to affordable housing. And there are several small, like half-acre parcels that the city has throughout the community, and there may be opportunities there to work with a nonprofit service provider to develop those undeveloped parcels or surplus properties into some type of housing situation that can accommodate either homeless individuals that are ready to access those services, or also support the homeless individuals or families that are within the school district, the school system, because that's another piece that was very clear from the work group, that while we have the visible homeless, we do not want to forget about the homeless that we do not see and those that are in our school system and the homeless families that need assistance to be able to continue that. So again, and speeding through this and glossing over, there's a lot of fine detail, but those are one of the things that really came out of the conversation of the work group. One thing on the converting surplus properties, they didn't like the idea. The work group, were very clear that the city should not become landlords, but trying to work out that partner that can be that transition those properties to a nonprofit service provider, so the city doesn't become a landlord in that situation and ultimately responsible for the management operation of the home. And then finally, the last strategy on this goal is review and update city zoning and other policies that are barriers to development of affordable housing. That's aligning with our efforts on the affordable housing strategies, the housing action plan, and all those efforts we have been working on with the Regional Housing Council to look at how do we promote more types of affordable or low income or permanently stored housing in the community. So again, these are just 5 strategies on this goal. They did look at several others, but those didn't raise up to that level of the majority can live with. And some of those other strategies that were considered and talked about but didn't make it to this final, I guess, to the surface, included expanding the faith-based opportunities for faith-based to be providing shelters or being hosts to encampments. And part of that reason is there hasn't been a lot of interest to date from the faith-based community, and that's a lot to ask them. And if that's something they want to do, that they should be able to move forward with that mission. It shouldn't be something the city should be trying to push or promote. I mentioned the rehab of existing buildings, and then also the mitigation site, tent site type concepts. That didn't raise to the surface because they thought that, again, as I said before, the tents are very temporary. You want to have a little bit more substantial structure, and then also something that is a pathway out of homelessness and in like a short-term transitional environment out of homelessness into services and preferred supported housing. And again, those that didn't make it to the top don't go away. They're still part of the plan, but those may be something to be considered in the future when different circumstances present themselves or community input provides support for and acting on them. So under goal 2, the services and resources are seamless, streamlined, easy to access, and trauma informed, and tailored to the individual person experiencing homelessness. Again, the work group had a lot of conversation about you need to meet the individual where they are, and how do we do that best is on the ground in the trenches. So there are several strategies under this that they identified. One is continue the participation in the LEAD program. The LEAD program is the law enforcement just diversion program that if somebody goes into the criminal system and they are a low-level offender, instead of going through the criminal system and either going into jail or paying fines, they have the option to go to diverted services. And if they'll go through these case services, then they would be they would go out of the criminal justice system and into that housing and service support. And so they, again, it's an intersect point that was identified that would be continued to be an opportunity to give that incentive instead of just going back to either, to deal with your drug addiction or other type of ailments, that there's an incentive to go in and access those services in order to lead a path out of homelessness. Review of service gaps as part of the new coordinator position. So this is kind of close with a later goal I'll talk about. But one of the things that they identified in that regional coordination is making sure we have a designated individual that can be that point of contact, that can identify the services that we are providing on the ground, how they're coordinated at the regional level and with other jurisdictions, and where there's gaps, try and identify how to fill those gaps so we reduce the number of individuals that may fall through. Then finally, work with regional partners to expand services needed to help exit homelessness more quickly. And again, that's making sure we understand what the system out there is, who provides what type of services, and how do we connect individuals to the right path so that they can have as much success as possible, and we're meeting those service providers that can provide that resource. Goal 3, and again, as I go through these, and some of the processes as a work group and have worked on this for over a year and a half, there are some things the city had to take as actions during this timeline before this process was concluded. So a lot of some of these strategies and the conversations actually endorsed or affirm some of the actions the city has been taking. And so under robust prevention and early intervention strategies, complement other strategies to reduce long-term and chronic homelessness, again, is trying to create opportunity to intersect somebody that's potentially going into homelessness or just recently become homelessness, intersect them as quickly as we can so it's easier to get them out of that path versus long-term chronic illnesses, and you have additional issues that may manifest itself. So under this strategy, we have continue the mobile outreach team services. This is one of those strategies that got a lot of support, and I think it's apparent with the success of our community resource unit operating out of the police department and our partnership or contract with Olympic Health Recovery Services with their mobile outreach team that we brought on. And with that mobile outreach team, there's 2 individuals, 4 total, but if provide 7-day-a-week coverage, but 2 individuals on duty any day of the week. That one is a peer counselor and the other one is a crisis counselor that go out and meet with individuals and work with them, develop a relationship and get them into coordinated entry in the system to start accessing services. And we've had quite a bit of success with that partnership between our CRU and mobile outreach team. Strategy number 2 is provide financial assistance to meet short-term housing needs through existing contracts with local providers and administer pass-through funds to connect people to needed services. One of the things that the committee really focused on and had a lot of support for was trying to have early intervention and try to catch people before they become into homelessness to make sure that they can stay in housing or can be rapidly rehoused. And so those pass-through funds are funds from the state that provide what's called rapid rehousing dollars. And there are certain nonprofits in the community, in the area, that focus on keeping people in their current housing situation if they need rent assistance, or if they come all of a sudden lose their housing, whether it's whatever reason, medical or other type of loss of job or other issues, that they have a network where they can identify them, get them into other housing and get them their first set of months and get them established again. And the idea again is the longer somebody's in homelessness, the more challenging it is to help them get out of homelessness. And if we can have that early intersect point, early intervention, more effort and resources should be focused there. And that's one of the challenges we discovered through this process is everything's really based on a vulnerability index. That the higher you are on the vulnerability index, the higher in line you are for services. But to be in that high mark on that index means you have been out in the homeless community quite some time. And so what happens is you have people that are becoming homeless, there's not a lot of services there. So shoring up that gap and trying to figure out ways to make sure that those can get that assistance before they become homelessness or recently are homelessness. Goal 4 is all services offered in Lacey are highly collaborative and connected, making the most efficient and effective use of available resources towards achieving all other local goals of homelessness. And that's where earlier I mentioned having a single point of contact and identifying gaps and shoring up those gaps. This is where they identify that potentially consider creating a new staff coordinator position to manage the city's homeless strategies and coordinate local data and accountability. This will also help in communication, both within our individual teams within the city, but also regionally in other jurisdictions, and helps respond quickly to emerging situations. Right now, we do not have that type of position. It's kind of shared amongst several. And so if you've heard about the Super 8 situation, that took up a lot of time of individuals that had they had to pivot and focus on that for a month and a half, and versus having somebody dedicated to homeless response and coordinate our CRU or MOT, as well as our MOT team, as well as coordinating with the other homeless coordinators in the region. So that was one of the things that came out of the conversation as well. Then also standardized data collection in better to better improve and inform the system, and how we track progress to achieving some of these goals of trying to get to basically a zero effect homeless situation. One of the things we have going on currently, which is great news, and part of it was informed by this process, is regionally we're working on a Built for Zero program where we have a consultant coming in to do work with all the various jurisdictions and nonprofit service providers to identify what the system is, what the gaps, and develop a model where we can track and provide accountability for individuals coming through the system. So what I mean by that is, right now we have a coordinated entry process, which HMIS data reporting system, but not everybody has access to that data, nor does it track an individual that has first contact. Once they're connected to services, where they go after that. So we don't know how many are progressing through the various service models, how many are dropping out, and how many actually go into some level of housing, whether it be transitional, permanent supportive, or more. This Built for Zero strategy is to create a system that we can have a reporting mechanism that we can actually track how many are coming into homelessness, how many are going out, and make sure that we can account for individuals through that system to keep them on path. Also, it will help too that if somebody's identified, we know that who else is working with them, so we're not duplicating services as well. So that's something that's great that's coming out of this not only this conversation, but also the Regional Housing Council piece as well. And then good, and of course, coordinating our regional system and leveraging local strengths and everybody trying to get on the same page, working to common goals was another strategy that was very important to the committee. The education piece, this is pretty self-explanatory. You know, the community work group said, hey, the public needs to know, the community needs to know what the city's doing, what the status is, what the progress is. But one thing that they had a word of caution on this particular strategy was be careful not to step into the appearance of propaganda. So basically report the information, the facts, here's what we're doing, here's what it's based off of, and here's the results, so that the community, when they have questions, can get that information. And then also there is that transparency of the city's actions. And then finally, we have goal 6, ensure the community is safe, clean, and inviting environment for all who live and work in pleasure. And so again, this validates some of the existing actions we have been taking. We had a lot of support for the strategy 6.1, which is to continue the cleanup program. And in concert with, I'm going to use lots of different acroteams or team names, the community resource unit with the mobile outreach team, we also created a rapid response team that are all working together. The rapid response team is out of our public works operations division, and their responsibility is they will respond to abandoned encampments and clean those abandoned encampments up, so we kind of reduce the amount of litter, garbage, and such in the community. They'll also pick up shopping carts that are abandoned around the community too, just to kind of keep the community clean in appearance. And so that received a lot of support out of the work group conversation. The other piece, which was a really difficult one, was provide access to bathrooms near designated shelter areas and other public spaces where outdoor and or business bathroom use has been problematic. This is a very polarized topic. And where the work group was like, look, we don't want to provide bathrooms because then that's an expense and resource and it accommodates a certain condition. But we have to provide bathrooms because we don't want to have people going to the bathroom on the ground, on the sidewalks, or around businesses. You got to do something. And so this is one of those things where it may not be, not even, it might be 50-50 in popularity or non-popularity in the community, but the city still has to take that action and explain why. And it's all about making sure you have a clean environment. One of the strategies that didn't make it up to the top, very similar, was the city providing hygiene trailers, shower and hygiene trailers to areas of encampment. And again, they said that shouldn't be something the city should do. Now, if a nonprofit like Build-A-Bus is doing something, that's fine. But providing hygiene trailers to area encampments validates that encampment, and it should be set up that if you create a tiny village or those type of things, those type of minis should be there. And that should be that intersect of getting people committing to taking accessing services and starting that process. So they were very clear on the differences between those two types of strategies. So I know it probably took a little bit longer than maybe anticipated to get through that, but I was kind of quickly going through a lot of work, a lot of information, a lot of conversation. So I know I breezed through it quite quickly, and I'm sure there's probably some questions. So I'll turn it over to the Planning Commission if you have any questions. Also offer too, if you do want to follow up in more detail, I can be available to have, meet with you individually or as in groups. We can talk about it a little bit more and give you some more, as much information as you need.
All to read the report that he sent out. So, Mark, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you just answered it. Can we get a copy of that PowerPoint or that presentation?
Yes, that presentation I emailed out before the meeting to all the Planning Commission members.
Okay.
And then also, if you go to the city website, and I'll send out another email with the link to the city website where it has a page for the homeless work group, because on that page also includes information related to the process, but also the webinars that we had. Because one of the challenges, we had to bring experts in to help inform the committee on different things are going on. So we ended up having, I think, a speaker series of 7 webinars that talk about different topics from behavioral health to Veterans Administration and other, so over 7 hours of content if you want to sit down and watch through that, because that was pretty informative as well.
And if it's raining extremely hard, please go to one of the past council meetings where Rick gave his report and listen to that.
Yes, and you'll hear from some of the work group members. They helped present in that report, and then they also spoke at the end some of their experiences related to the process. Yes, Mark.
One other question. Now, has the council approved that staff position, and what's the progress there?
So that is something that is still being wrestled. No, the council has not approved that staff position. It's very similar to the side recommendations that the Planning Commission had related to climate action and the forestry positions. So we got to figure out how we achieve some of the policies that are being created or the strategies that are being endorsed and how that fits with budget and resources, and if there are other ways that we can accomplish it. So that's something that's going to come through the budgetary process that's coming June, going into next year's budget. And there's no guarantee that there won't be that position, but we'll have to figure out how we compensate for that within the organization as we have the resources come available. There really is a resource base. But those conversations are happening at the administration level, and it's going to be something that will work out through that budgetary process.
I sure hope that there's support for that, because from what we've seen, you guys are already maxed out, but this is something that's an important enough issue in the city that if they don't bring in a dedicated individual to run that, I think it'd be disappointing.
Yeah. And then while if there's maybe more questions for me while that's working, I'm going to also mention that, because I forgot to end of my report, next steps. So the idea is we're going to have this report, final document come out of the work group. And of course, we couldn't get really consensus on everything. If you notice real quick, you go through those votes, there's always one opposition vote on every one of those. And one individual was just, it was for whatever reason. And so that was what was challenging. So we have these lists of recommendations. So now it's incumbent upon staff to start taking that handoff from the work group, start bringing in some of the more of the background information, and start having a series of meetings with the council to try to build into a final document that can be something that can be produced. Now it'll probably take it will take some time. I'm not going to say 3 or 4 months, because right now we're trying to build it into our bandwidth and capacity, but this is not the end point of this process. There will be continual more conversation with council, and then ultimately more community engagement once you get to a final product. Yes, Kieran.
I was curious, you said that one of the items was considering, I don't know if it was gifting or leasing land to charitable organizations to develop. I was wondering if those lands are close to services or close to bus routes or close to something that would actually be a place that people who are economically challenged could actually afford to live and commute and have access to services.
That is a great observation and question, because that is the other piece of the conversation the work group have, is when you have facilities set up, you got to be services and access. And most of those services are clustered in downtown Olympia, and they don't have the capacity to create satellite services. And so any type of facility, we can maybe get close to a bus route, but you still have that transportation issue and proximity of services. Now, your point specifically about our surplus properties, where these properties are, they're actually former infrastructure like well fields or well sites or those type of things that are no longer, have been abandoned and no longer in need for that purpose. So they're half acre and they're in the middle of neighborhoods. A lot of them are actually down Carpenter Road, where some have been identified. And so they're not close to services and they're not really close to any type of transit routes. So one of the things that we've been working on is, and you probably heard talk to the council conversation about the Genesis project. So we have identified some city surplus property. Well, let me take that back. We were working at city surplus property for this purpose. We had to pivot. So we're working with Homes First in a partnership with them and a partnership with Community Action Council to buy a house and remodel it to provide manage and supervise shelter for homeless students in the North Virginia Public School System to be able to live and finish out their school with case management on site. That originally started out looking at our surplus properties, but the cost to the redevelopment, the money we had and the partnerships, we had to pivot. But that doesn't mean future we can't use those property for that purpose. Also, I mentioned the clean and sober living strategy with Oxford houses. We were successful this last legislative session to get some funding from the capital budget to, I think it's around $500,000 to expand and promote Oxford style housing arrangements. That's something too that the city's going to be working on going forward. And that may be some of those surplus properties, maybe a catalyst for new construction, or maybe better to just buy an existing house and convert. But those are the type of things that we're going to be weighing as we look at these strategies. And again, go back and measure the accountability, the fiscal responsibility, all those different pieces that the community said that we need to consider.
Gail?
Yeah, I think this is an enormous endeavor, and I don't know that we'll ever solve the problem, but the nature of homelessness is such that people aren't homeless in Lacey or Olympia or Tumwater. They're just homeless, and they drift from one community to another depending on who rousted them last. So how do you coordinate between other jurisdictions who are trying to do the same thing for a cross-residential, non-residential population? I mean, do they sign on in Lacey and Tumwater and Olympia, or how does that work?
Well, there's an existing system out there. It's called coordinated entry, that once somebody agrees to accept services, they're entered in that coordinated entry system. Oh. And then they're assessed a vulnerability access. And right now, Community Action Council manages that system. Then all the nonprofit service providers work within that coordinated system platform. Oh. And then there's a HMIS tracking software where they can enter that and they can report out and try somewhat vaguely track people. It's not very
robust.
Robust, no. And you have all different service providers, and sometimes they're more than one are working with one individual, or one individual stopped with one and picked up another. So there's always that overlap. And that's the whole purpose of that Built for Zeros discussion, is how do we make that more robust and transparent and accountable system? Yeah. And other than that, and then of course with the nonprofits managing that system, there's not a lot of reporting out to jurisdictions. Yeah. And so the jurisdictions, as we come together at the Regional Housing Council, they're weighing and making a recommendation on funding, but they don't really know what the matrix are going down at on the ground level.
And you have a lot of nonprofits with sort of changing staff as you move along. I mean, there aren't people permanently in those kind of roles.
And there's a little bit of competition because they're all trying to get funding for their program. Yeah. And so we're trying to smooth those waters. That's you hit upon it. How does that coordination work now? It's working, but not that well. There's some gaps, and so as a Regional Housing Council, that's one of the charges, trying to figure out how we smooth out those gaps.
How you make that work?
Better communication. Now, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, there is some level of communication. I meet weekly with other jurisdictional staff talking about regional housing council topics, homeless response, the Super 8 issue as an example, some of the inside and shoots cleanups. We have that conversation, but one of the challenges we have between jurisdictions is there are different levels or bars of standards. And you would, if you talk to say other jurisdictions, they may think Lacey is a higher barrier type of approach versus some of their approach.
Yeah.
We got to figure out how to get some commonality between those standards so that when we are working with individuals in Lacey, if they want to move to a path of least resistance, then that's going to some other jurisdiction, and vice versa. If they're working with somebody, but they put them in, house them in Lacey, but they're not providing the support services and oversight and management, then that impacts another jurisdiction. So we got to have that conversation about what are our common goals and what are our common standards so that we can operate within and have some equity through that process.
Yeah. I hope if that person gets hired, they're paid a lot of money.
I hope they're effective.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I'm seeing none. Communication and announcements, anything from anybody? Next meeting is April 5th at 5 o'clock, and it's going to be another Zoom meeting. Yep. So, and then the following one will be the hybrid if everything plans out well.
Okay.
So at this point, we can say we are adjourned.
Okay.
And thank you, commissioners, for your service to the city of Lacey and its residents.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
And welcome, Alan.
Yep.
Yeah,
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night.